right. Hey, in this session, we are going to talk about some discipleship strategies and best practices to try to help really support maybe what you're already doing. Maybe you're, like I said, maybe you're carving out a brand new discipleship strategy and assimilation process, or maybe you're just trying to refresh and dial in some things. So we're going to talk through some overall concepts as well as kind of drill into some specifics. And for those of you who use the Following Jesus book in your discipleship strategy, or you're maybe thinking about beginning to use it, also talk some specifics in a moment too about how we use it as a church, how many other churches are using it. So we'll get into that in a minute. But as you're beginning to consider discipleship strategies and process, just a couple things real quick to think about in the bigger picture standpoint. You kind of have some different phases, if you will, of discipleship. So first you have the initial discipleship phase, the initial strategy. This is where somebody's brand new, fresh out of the gate, getting ready to follow Jesus. And this is brand new. We're trying to make sure they got the essentials, they got what they need to really know and follow Jesus. And really that was kind of the heart and where this book really came out of, was because I was like, man, I want to help church be more effective in that initial space of somebody new to really following Jesus. So this is the space too where you want to have more intentionality in your teaching. We talked about in other sessions different, you got organic kind of discipleship that happens, and then you've got intentional. And this new initial phase of a new believer's life really needs to be an intentional space, because if we're not careful, people come to our church, they respond to Christ, it's very, very exciting. Then they leave the doors of our church and it's like, okay, now what? Okay, what happens? Are they ready? Do they have any tools? Are they prepared at all? Maybe sometimes, we've encouraged them. We've said, hey, come back next week. That's an important next step. But they might leave, and now they're kind of back to the wolves, if you will. And I really feel like one of the things with discipleship in this initial phase of discipleship is in the story of the sower and the different soil and the seed. I really felt like God was kind of highlighting the fact as I was reading it through in this context of discipleship, where the seed goes out, the word goes out, the gospel goes out to these different soils and these different environments. And then it's a process of not only the soil, but also other outside elements that are impacting the potential of the seed's growth. And in one setting, when they're on the ground, the birds come and they try to eat the seed. They try to steal the seed away. And I really felt like discipleship, and especially this initial kind of blitz to help a new believer know what it means to know and follow him, is almost like bird netting. It's a protective covering over the seed and over the ground, so that that initial phase of germination, initial phase of a seed going into the soil, is able to happen without the enemy trying to come in and rob them. And too many times we get the seed, we get a Bible, we get someone to make a decision to follow Christ, and then they go out there and they got no protective covering, and the seed is getting stolen, it's getting robbed, it's getting destroyed. Or in the parable of the seed and the sower there, you've got, the weeds and different cares of life begin to choke out the seed. Again, another thing that when we apply discipleship to those settings, we have a greater potential to help weed out the garden with a new believer. And those things that could come in and steal and choke out what God is doing, if we're in there in discipleship, if we're helping to follow, having them follow you as they follow Christ, we've got a greater potential and capacity to be able to help that seed grow and take root and really thrive in this process of becoming more like Christ. So really be mindful of that initial phase. This is often one of those seasons where we don't really always have a lot of great space, but I know that we can, and it's so crucial that we're ready to really respond right away for new believers. And I'll talk more about some opportunities with that in a second. The other kind of big category is ongoing discipleship. Okay, so in different settings, Paul with the different churches, you'd say, hey, listen, you're doing great in this, and now I just want to urge you, in 1 Thessalonians 4 is one of them. He says, yet I urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. He's talking about love. I want you to do it more. Hey, you're doing great, but now it's time to keep doing it. And this is more of the ongoing discipleship journey that every single one of us are on, and we can't neglect that. We don't want to forget. It's not just about a 4-week course, a 7-week small group, 1 month something. It's about this ongoing journey, and this is where some of those more organic environments that we want to create in our churches, where we can build relationships, where we can have real genuine discipleship to emerge and to develop. And this is where a culture really helps the ongoing discipleship factors. So I already know Jesus. I know some of the basics. I know how to pray, read the Bible. I've been water baptized, filled with the Holy Spirit, the whole deal. But man, I got marriage issues, and I got parenting drama, and I've got relationship situations, and I got money stuff. And all of those kind of things of life, cares of life, different things, those happen best when we can do life together with other people that can see, get up close and personal, get authentic, and then we can call each other out on some stuff. Man, I'm so much better in my life. I'm sure you are too, because I got close enough relationally, and over years, people have been able to say, hey, Samuel, you're off course. Hey, man, you gotta make some changes there. Hey, and so we got to create that space for that ongoing discipleship. Another kind of big category is kind of the more pastoral care side of discipleship. And sometimes we think about this, sometimes we don't in church life, but you're helping a new believer with the essentials. Then you're trying to create relational space for this ongoing discipleship to happen and to emerge over time. But sometimes because of life and dysfunction and pain and brokenness and hurts, where people are dealing with much more extreme scenarios and situations, hurts, habits, hang-ups, that whole kind of thing. And in that kind of case, there's two sides of it. One is there may need to be some more professional counseling that we want to make sure we're ready to refer people to help encourage people to really kind of dig in and maybe unpack something from their past, something from their processing that needs to be challenged and really professionally worked out, and that's fantastic. But then there also may be, more pastoral care from the standpoint of, deliverance and healing in that type of a way. And we got to be mindful that sometimes we try to, we just got to help them disciple through a problem and renew the mind. But man, if the enemy's trying to attack their life and oppress their life, they need more like freedom and deliverance to come into their situation to help break off some of the chains of the enemy so they can get free, so then they can really get on the healthy discipleship path. Sometimes as churches, if we're not careful, if somebody's really dealing with a lot of heavy, more oppression, we're frustrated because they're not getting it. They're not growing. They're not going to the next level. And so they can tend to just kind of move on to the next church rather than saying, hey, now there's a deeper problem here. Let's make sure we have the space to facilitate helping them find freedom and healing and hope in Jesus. And once they break off those chains, they're going to be in a much better space to actually be able to engage in the maturing and discipleship process. So sometimes people need to just renew their mind. Sometimes people need to get freedom, and usually the two don't work for the other. You can't, kind of cast out, something when they really just need to, get in the Word and renew their mind. And then sometimes, if you got demonic oppression messing with your life, renewing your mind isn't going to help that. You need someone to help you get in there and kick the enemy off of their life. So having space for that and being intentional with that is super crucial in this process, so that they can kind of like re-enter your typical discipleship strategy. I think another kind of big category, which is sort of a different track that we want to talk about, would be more of the leadership kind of discipleship track. So you have everyone in this broader kind of discipleship category, but then you're really wanting to mature leaders and mature, maybe the fivefold ministry giftings that are in your church. And that can be another separate track where you're really intentionally engaging them in a discipleship journey. But that's not kind of our primary focus here, but I wanted to just kind of mention that category. So what are some of the best practices? What are some of the best ways that we facilitate discipleship in our church? I want to say, first of all, that it's so important that you take the time to really seek and ask God, how is this going to happen best in your church and in your context? You know what? Too many times we go from gleaning and learning from somebody to just copycatting somebody. And the disservice we do to ourselves and to our church when we do the copycatting model is that we don't really take the time to seek God and ask Him for His blueprint, His download to really reach and disciple our people in our city. When we attempt to just mimic somebody else, we're really stealing their revelation from God for their city, their church, and their context. And so some of it might apply, some of it might not, but we're really kind of hit and miss with our strategy. So it's great to glean, great to learn, great to take concepts even from this course, but ultimately you got to go and say, God, how do you want us to really facilitate this in our context? So does every church that makes disciples have to have an official small group, connect group strategy? Most do in some form, but that isn't the official answer. The Bible doesn't say thou must have a small group ministry. The Bible does show us in Acts that they met together, they broke bread, they met in homes, right? That is a great example of the driving verse behind why many churches do small groups. But you got to have kind of that word from God as to why are you doing the things that you're doing rather than just kind of going through the motions of formalities. I think it is key that we create spaces, we create environments for people to engage with God, grow together, and mature in Christ. And I think small groups are one of the absolute top ways. Some type of small group structure, whether it's highly devotional, whether it's more of a relational model, more of a dinner party kind of experience, whatever it is, we got to get more people spending more time together, having fun, enjoying life, and then discipleship is really going to thrive in that kind of space. What about like a discipleship class, a course? Those are great options as well. Again, some do both. Small group settings and courses. Some pick one or the other. It may depend on your church, your context, your style. There's a variety of ways you can help facilitate it. The biggest thing is just that it is happening and that we do get intentional with it. We don't want to just leave all discipleship to chance and go, well, hey, it should all just be happening. No, we need to get intentional. We need to create pathways and clear next steps so that people know how to begin the discipleship process at your church. I think that is an important note, that whatever it is that you're creating, you want to make sure it's clear as to what is the next step. So let me talk about some more specific details and different things that you can do. I'm going to speak to it from the context of somebody who's implementing the Following Jesus book in their church, because many that are tuning in are doing that. And, you may want to consider this in your church context. And I know that's so many in both English and Spanish, and more translations coming. Different parts of the world are really finding this a valuable resource. But let's talk a little bit about kind of some of the discipleship journey, some of those different components. So first of all, let's talk about that initial gift or connection point to a new believer. Many are using this as that gift when somebody gets saved at their church. But I want to talk about more of the initial context. If you're going, hey, I want to be better at discipling people. Well, first of all, the first key to beginning discipleship is to know who's getting saved and who is getting saved at your church, or that we need people to be getting saved, right? So a key part of that is first that you got to have a clear call to salvation. If your church doesn't already have it, and every church has a little bit of a different flow, different style, but regardless of your style, your denomination, your exact belief systems around all that. There's got to be a point in place where people have a clear call to make a decision to follow Christ. Not only is this important for eternity, obviously for their own life, but if we're going to really be able to disciple them, we've got to call them to that place where they say, yes, I want to follow Jesus. Now we can begin to engage them. Now we can begin to work with them. So we want to have a clear call to following Christ. And then we need to be able to be intentional about making sure that we connect with those people who made that decision. It's one thing to say, oh man, we were in church, we call people to Christ. I had 100 people raise their hand in our church service. That's awesome. Did we connect with any of them? Oh, not really. Well, then we're really missing a moment. If we're going to call people to Christ, we've got to make sure we do the important next step, which is what is that follow-up? So at our church, C3 Church here in San Diego, and many other churches do it like this as well, is whenever the preaching is done, there's that call to salvation, that clear call, that decision, and people are saying yes to Christ. And so sometimes we have them raise their hand and they stay in their seat, and they're saying yes, and they're praying and dedicating themselves to follow Christ. Sometimes we invite them to come forward down to the stage, down to the altar, and we're praying with them there. Either way, then the next step is very, very key, is that you have a clear where are we going from here kind of step. And for a new believer, you got to have the, okay, now what? For the church, you're going, I got to be clear as to what's next. For a new believer who's just made that decision to follow Christ, they're going, okay, now what? And so you got to answer that and deal with that. And so that is where a book like Following Jesus, there are other great resources too, but a book like this, a Bible, making sure that they walk away from your church experience with the next step guide of, now what do I do that I just made this decision? So when we call people forward, we have people that come behind them to pray with them. And so we have a response lounge that we call it, where once they pray the prayer of salvation, then we usually grab a hold of a copy of the book Following Jesus. We say, hey, we're so excited for you. Just pray this prayer. You got people around you. They're unbelievable. They want to pray with you. They want to encourage you. And just take a quick moment. We got a gift we want to give you. It's called Following Jesus. It's going to help you in your next steps in your relationship with Christ. And we got a Bible if you need it. We want to get into your hands. And we're just really going to come alongside of you, come around you. And so just take a couple minutes and follow them. Then when they take them to the response lines, they're gathering their information, and they are really taking the time to make that relational connection and get them into kind of the discipleship assimilation process, which we'll talk more about at a later time. Or if we leave them in the seats, we're lifting up a copy of the book, say, hey, listen, we got a copy of this book. Come and grab one, or come out, talk to one of our team out in the lobby. We want to get this book into your hands and just celebrate with you. And when they give them this book, then we're making sure we're grabbing contact details from them. It's nice to have altar calls or people saying yes to Jesus. It's another thing to be responsible with those decisions and effectively following them up. So that's so key that you take the time to gather that data and gather that information. Some of the other ways that people are using the Following Jesus book as a next step after that point of decision is a couple key ways. One is in a Following Jesus course or some type of discipleship course. This can be used as an absolute curriculum for that. At the end of each chapter, there's actually challenge kind of questions where they dig into the word themselves, as well as action steps after each chapter that are related to whether it was prayer and worship, water baptism, the church, sharing their faith, whatever it is. And so they use this as a weekly study guide for a discipleship like on-campus course. One of the things that we do here at C3, and then many churches as well, is actually creating more of a Following Jesus group or a new believers group, where it's more that you're beginning to shape that at-home community, that relationship context, and where they're sitting down with other groups of new believers and a great few couples, mature believers in your church that are walking them through this, spending time together, having food, sharing that relationship DNA that's so important for discipleship to foster. And that way you're creating openness, authenticity, where people can share deal with their stuff, get questions answered, and really walk through this course together. Man, I'm just getting story after story from that New Believers course, or different churches, youth ministries, young adult ministries that are using it in a small group setting with leaders, with new believers, with team, all kinds of different environments. But that's a great way to use it. Create a class or a small group. If you have a small group culture in your church already, I would encourage you, create a small group environment or for new believers, because then after they get used to that setting, you can transition them into an ongoing small group that is going to be healthy and strong for them as well. Here's another great example or idea from a discipleship standpoint. If you're really trying to figure out, okay, how do we really get more of our church engaged in spiritual basics and discipleship strategy, do a weekend series in your church. And you can use the Following Jesus book as basically like a series for a month. And this can be an absolutely exciting way to do it, because all week long on your Sundays, you're preaching on the different key topics here. And it's just great Bible teaching, gospel teaching, Jesus-focused kind of material. So it's a great series. And then simultaneously, you're doing small group studies that are alongside of it. So, you can give out the book to new believers, but then you can actually, for your small group church-wide, churches will, do a nominal fee where they have people buy the book. That way it just helps you offset the cost in your church. But this can be a great way to do it. I love doing this. Sometimes I'll come in and maybe help a church kick off a weekend series by preaching, kind of the intro chapter of the book, and then they can kind of take off from there. So that's another great way for churches to do discipleship, not only just with my book, but, choose a book that's got great content that you can preach on a Sunday, and then small groups are happening throughout the month, in homes, spending time together, and just a great way to add more people, kind of a cohesive, collective push together. Great way to add more people to the conversation, getting them into the discipleship process, into the discipleship journey and assimilation process there. Another way that churches are being intentional with discipleship is actually to have kind of like a one-on-one discipleship opportunity and option. So when people get a copy of the book or they respond to Christ in your church setting, then we follow up with them and engage and have somebody go, hey, I would love to grab coffee. Hey, I want to spend some time going through this book or answering questions on faith, and really kind of getting right from the get-go that one-on-one relational discipleship model. And that's really where people are going to begin to thrive, grow, and develop and mature. So those are some kind of basic overview of different discipleship strategies, approach, function. The more and more churches I'm getting a chance to serve with and team up with Following Jesus book, it's just so fun to see the different ways everyone is using it. And so I'd love to continue to engage that conversation. Any churches that want to say, hey, let's reach out and have some further conversations about discipleship strategy and process and implementation, feel free to reach out. I love to be able to team up with you and your church for a greater level of these kind of conversations as well. So I think the big takeaway is get intentional with it. Be specific. You'd be surprised at how many churches I'll go to and they'll call people to Christ, but they have no next step of what to do next. Or some churches just may have no decision opportunity to say yes to Jesus. So I want to encourage you, have a clear call to salvation, and then make sure before everybody leaves that service, if they're new, if they've just committed to Christ, they have a clear next step of what do I do now that I've just made the decision to follow Christ. And again, I'm excited. I'm going to have an interview with a friend of mine who is one of the top assimilation directors and pastors over one of the fastest growing churches in the U.S. I want to talk real specifics around how-tos and some strategies of broad assimilation over multi-site campus and over a growing, thriving church. So come on, let's get intentional. Let's be faithful. Let's be effective and at creating that space and those atmospheres and those avenues so that we don't leave people, kind of let people fall through the cracks, but that we are at making disciples effectively.